He played Julio Fuentes, but Gregory Sierra was the most dangerous actor in Hollywood. Most people remember Gregory Sierra as Julio Fuentes, the quick-witted Puerto Rican neighbor on Sanford and Son who became unforgettable in just 12 episodes. His charm and comedic timing made him television gold. But the characters he played on screen were nothing compared to who he actually was. Behind the cameras existed a man whose real life was far more extraordinary, tragic, and inspiring than any script could capture. Before Hollywood knew his name, Gregory Sierra survived childhoods that would break most people. He navigated New York's toughest neighborhoods, fought through abandonment and gang violence, and survived an identity crisis that could have destroyed him before he ever stepped in front of a camera. Then, after breaking through to success, he made choices that terrified producers, choices rooted in artistic integrity that ultimately cost him millions. His story is about a man who refused to compromise, even when the price was everything. From abandoned child to survivor. Gregory Sierra was born on January 25, 1937, in Manhattan's Spanish Harlem. At just 6 years old, his parents abandoned him completely. His immediate family dissolved, and he was left to fend for himself in a city that showed no mercy to orphan children. His aunt became his lifeline, raising him in a predominantly Irish enclave in New York. But the wound of parental rejection never healed. Growing up as a Puerto Rican kid in an Irish neighborhood meant survival in its rawest form. The streets were controlled by ethnic gangs. Invisible territorial lines meant violence if crossed. Sierra didn't belong anywhere. He learned to fight before he learned to read. By his teenage years, Gregory was living a shocking double life. By day, he attended Cathedral College of the Immaculate Conception in Brooklyn, a rigorous preparatory school for boys considering the Catholic priesthood. By night, he ran with violent street gangs. He fought. He stole. He survived in an ecosystem where a wrong look could get you killed. This contradiction became unbearable. During a violent confrontation, he suffered a serious injury that nearly cost him his life. In that moment of near-death clarity, Sierra realized one of these paths would eventually consume him completely. He couldn't continue on both. The accidental calling. To escape Spanish Harlem streets, Sierra enlisted in the United States Air Force. The military provided structure and discipline, a legitimate path away from the neighborhood that had nearly killed him. When his enlistment ended, he returned to New York without a clear plan. He just knew he couldn't go back. What came next seemed like accident. Sierra walked into a Manhattan acting school audition purely to support a friend. He had no intention of auditioning himself. Then the instructor noticed him and asked Sierra to perform an impromptu improvisation. Something ignited. Sierra stood up and performed, and the room went silent. The school rejected his friend and immediately admitted Sierra. Gregory had accidentally stumbled into his life's calling without searching for it. He spent years as a serious dramatic actor, touring with the National Shakespeare Company. He performed complex classical roles, Macbeth, Romeo, the Duke of Austria at the prestigious New York Shakespeare Festival in 1967. The same hands that had fought in Spanish Harlem now held scripts. Acting became his salvation. A raw performance that changed television. In 1973, Sierra guest starred on All in the Family in an episode called Archie is Branded. He played Paul Benjamin, an intense militant Jewish extremist protecting the Bunker family from neo-Nazis. The character was angry and wounded, shaped by a harsh world. Sierra poured his own childhood abandonment and street survival into the performance. The result was so emotionally raw that producers made an unprecedented decision. The episode ended in absolute silence. No closing theme music. No audience applause. Just the image of Benjamin's car exploding. It remains the only episode in All in the Family's entire history to end that way. Shortly after, Sierra was cast as Julio Fuentes on Sanford and Son. In just 12 episodes, he became unforgettable. Where Red Fox's Fred Sanford built comedy through insults, Julio simply smiled, fired back something sharper, and left everyone speechless. Audiences loved him. But the man who played that friendly neighbor carried a reputation that frightened producers. The true story behind that reputation is only now being fully understood. The refusal that cost him everything. In 1975, ABC pressured Sierra into joining Barney Miller as Detective Sergeant Chano Emmanuel. He didn't want a weekly ensemble contract, but producer Danny Arnold promised to quickly build a solo starring vehicle for him. Sierra signed based on that promise alone, feeling trapped. Once filming began, problems emerged immediately. Sierra's hyper-realistic dramatic style disrupted the show's lighthearted pacing. While other actors played for laughs, Sierra played for truth. In one episode, Detective Chano kills 2 bank robbers in the line of duty. Sierra didn't play it as a triumph, he played it as psychological tragedy, delivering a harrowing breakdown that completely overshadowed the show's lead, Hal Linden. Recognizing that Sierra's character was hijacking the series, the writers restricted his screen time. They gave him fewer lines. They kept him in the background because they feared what his presence might transform the show into. The conflict erupted when Sierra discovered that ABC was fast-tracking a Fish spin-off for Abe Vegeta ahead of the promised show for him. The network had broken faith with him. Arnold had broken his promise. Feeling disrespected and underutilized, Sierra quit Barney Miller at the end of season 2. He walked away from a hit show, steady income, and security most actors spend their entire careers chasing. Danny Arnold was so enraged that he enacted unprecedented revenge. He didn't write a transfer storyline for Chano. When season 3 began, Detective Chano simply vanished with no explanation. Arnold wanted to erase Sierra's existence from the show entirely, and he succeeded. Nearly a decade later in 1984, Sierra was cast as Lieutenant Lou Rodriguez in Miami Vice. The show was positioned to be a cultural phenomenon. But toxic friction with key individuals on set made the environment unbearable. Sierra was a man who didn't tolerate anything less than full commitment to the craft. Desperate to escape, Sierra personally begged the producers to kill off his character. He wanted out so badly that he was willing to be assassinated on screen. They agreed. Lieutenant Lou Rodriguez was eliminated by an assassin in the 4th episode. Sierra's reputation for refusing long-term ensemble contracts earned him a unique legacy, and Gregory Sierra billing a prestigious, standalone credit that signified a top-tier guest appearance. It became a mark of distinction in television. The tragedy that defined him. Following his departure from Barney Miller, Danny Arnold finally delivered the promised spin-off, A.S. Hudson Street, a medical sitcom where Sierra would star as the lead. The promise was finally being fulfilled. Unfortunately, ABC canceled it after 5 episodes. The ratings were abysmal. The spin-off that was supposed to launch him crashed and burned instead. On May 16, 1976, at the height of his sitcom fame, Sierra married his second wife, Susan Joyce Pollock. The wedding photographs show a man genuinely hopeful. He had survived the streets. He had survived the feuds. But the relationship was intensely volatile behind closed doors. Friends described escalating arguments and silences that stretched for days. By late 1977, Susan demanded a formal separation. She needed space. Sierra agreed, hoping time apart would heal what was broken. In January 1978, 2 weeks into the grueling shoot of A.S. Hudson Street, Susan Pollock died under tragic circumstances. The production stopped. Crew members stood in stunned silence. Sierra, filming a scene, was pulled aside and told what had happened. The man who had played a weeping, traumatized detective was now living that trauma in real life. Unlike many Hollywood stars who hide personal tragedy behind publicists, Sierra was brutally candid with reporters. In an emotional 1978 press interview, he confessed that Susan's separation from him had left him hollowed out. He carried an overpowering sense of personal guilt that would define every role he played afterward. "A part of me died with Susan," he told interviewers, "and the part that remained was not the same man who walked down the aisle on May 16, 1976. The guilt consumed him. He threw himself into his work not because he loved acting, but because working was the only thing that kept him from thinking about what he had lost." The final chapter. Sierra worked consistently across 5 decades, amassing over 130 film and television credits. He appeared in major motion pictures like Papillon, 1973, and The Towering Inferno, 1974. He worked alongside Steve McQueen, Paul Newman, and William Shatner. He never stopped being a working actor. But in 2018, his body forced a halt he couldn't control. In his early 80s, aggressive memory deterioration made it impossible for him to memorize scripts. The man who had once delivered complex Shakespearean soliloquies could no longer remember a single page of dialogue. He quietly withdrew from the industry, telling only his closest family. The public didn't know. The television fixture simply faded away, moving to the quiet retirement community of Laguna Woods, California, far from Spanish Harlem and the pressure cooker soundstages of Los Angeles. It was there that his body failed him in an even more devastating way. Sierra fought a brutal battle against both stomach cancer and liver cancer simultaneously. On January 4, 2021, he succumbed to complications from liver and stomach cancer. He was 83 years old. In keeping with his deeply private nature, there was no lavish Hollywood funeral. His body was cremated and his ashes were kept by his family. His death was kept so quiet that major entertainment news outlets didn't discover it until nearly 3 weeks later, on January 22, 2021. The legacy that endures. When tributes poured in, they didn't celebrate Gregory Sierra as the funny neighbor from Sanford and Son. They celebrated him as a fearless trailblazer who injected raw, multi-dimensional realism and uncompromising dignity into Latino representation at a time when Hollywood pushed flat, offensive stereotypes. Before Sierra, Puerto Rican characters were criminals or servants. Before Sierra, Latino actors played one-dimensional roles requiring broken English and played the fool. Sierra refused those roles. He demanded dignity, and he got it. Gregory Sierra was one of the most dangerous actors in Hollywood, not because he was violent or unpredictable on set, but because he was willing to walk away from everything. He walked away from hit shows. He walked away from guaranteed riches. He walked away from contracts that would have made him wealthy because he refused to compromise his integrity. The danger that defined his reputation was ultimately a shell protecting a heart that had been shattered by loss. He carried that grief into every performance until the day he died. But the characters he played, the barriers he broke, and the dignity he demanded will outlive us all.